Welcome to the Big Rig Bull podcast, hosted by Texas truck accident lawyer Reshard Alexander. This show discusses trucking and commercial motor vehicle law, news and events, what you should do if you are injured, and how you can best assist your attorney with your case. This podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship, and in the event that you are injured, you should contact the firm directly. This podcast is not a substitute for direct legal advice. It is purely informative. All right, so we're going to go pretty quickly through all this. Today we're going to talk about cargo securement. This is going to be part one of cargo securement because there's so much to cover in something like this. There's no way I could possibly go through the entire thing. So what do you need to know? Okay, well, not only am I a truck accident lawyer, but before I became a truck accident lawyer and went to law school, like I told you, I was the guy that when the truck driver pulled up to the home improvement stores, I was the guy who unloaded all the lumber third shift, and I handled that whole lumber section. So I'm kind of familiar with how this is supposed to be tied down when it comes to lumber and stuff like that, just off of past experiences. But we need to understand what exactly causes cargo wrecks, and then how does it affect truck drivers and motor carriers if they don't do what they're supposed to do? What should we be looking for when we're reviewing all this information? Okay, so like I said, this is very basic. We're going to just fly through this real quick so you'll get a basic understanding of what happens in cargo wrecks. So the Federal Motor Carriers Safety Association has put together a CSA program. It's called Compliance, Safety, and Accountability Program. So truck drivers and motor carriers are kind of like scored by this. It's kind of like their report card. When they do something bad, then it can affect their score. And once their score gets to a certain point, certain things are put in play with the FMCSA, such as they may get notification letters, they may get inspections on hand at their place of business that focus specifically on the problem, or they may have comprehensive inspections that look at the entire motor carrier and how they're operating. Additionally, they may get an out of service letter. If that's like the death knell, though. I mean, that is like what generally will really hurt someone because that says they can no longer drive as a motor. They can no longer employ people to drive as motor carriers, or the truck driver can no longer drive because sometimes the business is actually owned by the operator or the driver. So there are 7 basics within that CSA program, or 7 scores that you can get, 7 categories. One of the categories, the one that applies most importantly to cargo securement, is vehicle maintenance. So vehicle maintenance is the category that all this cargo securement, all this stuff is scored under. Okay, so if someone gets into a wreck and it's because of the fact that they didn't secure their load properly, that vehicle maintenance score is going to go down. All right, and additionally, there are about 350 things that you can be cited for under the vehicle maintenance CSA basic, and at least 100 of those apply directly to cargo securement. So it just goes to show you how important it is. I mean, not only is it important because of the fact that motor carriers and drivers can potentially lose their ability to operate, but it's also very important because of the fact that it can impact the public out here on the roadways if we have a rogue driver or a motor carrier who refuses to operate properly. So for drivers and motor carriers, this is not like criminal law. I mean, the law is much stricter when it comes to this type of stuff because of the fact that you're driving a huge piece of machinery, and it can impact and it can devastate people out on the roads. It's like driving a tank among scooters for the most part. because no conviction or out of service letter is needed to affect your basic score. So you don't have to, if you have a violation at a roadside inspection, that's going to cause your score to go down. You don't necessarily have to wait to have a conviction on your record from a traffic citation or something like that in order for your scores to start going down through the CSA program. Now, when you have a violation, the carrier score, it's going to stay on that carrier score and affect that score for at least the next 2 years. When it's a driver score, it's going to affect it for at least the next 3 years. The only saving grace that a truck driver or a motor carrier would have is the fact that over time, those infractions or violations will diminish over time. But like I said, they're going to stay there for 2 years if you're a carrier, 3 years if you're a driver. Additionally, when we're talking about the cargo securement and who needs to know this, who needs to understand this, it's not just necessarily commercial motor vehicles. Okay, it's really the vehicles that are covered are vehicles that have a gross vehicle weight rating, a gross combination weight rating, or a gross vehicle weight, or a gross combination weight of 10,001 pounds or more. Okay, that's a lot to say. Okay, but basically what you need to know is that if your vehicle weighs 10,001 pounds or more, you're going to be held to this standard when it comes to knowing how cargo is supposed to be secured on that vehicle. So that's something to think about, and that's something to know. Okay. Additionally, another vehicle that is covered, which we talked about this on last Friday, I think, when I talked about hazardous materials transportation law. Transporting hazardous material in not in any quantity, but in a quantity that requires placarding. So if you see a car or a truck, if you see a truck out here that has one of those diamond placards on it, that means that they have to abide by 49 CFR Part 393 as far as how they secure that cargo, right? Now, what causes cargo wrecks? Well, number one, improper securement of the cargo. What I mean by that is, if the cargo is not distributed correctly on the back of that bed, if it's not secured with tie downs, and if the vehicle equipment, the stuff that is that the trucker is going to carry on the vehicle to help him secure or her secure the load, if those three things are not tied, if they're not tied down and they're not handled correctly, those will cause a cargo securement for sure. So if you have a bunch of lumber that you're transporting to Lowe's, or a truck driver has a bunch of lumber that they're transporting to Lowe's, and it's not distributed correctly, and it's not secured correctly, and the things that the driver used to secure the load are not put away correctly, those things are likely going to cause a huge catastrophe out here on the roads. Okay. The number two thing that causes cargo wrecks is driver vision obscurement. So the cargo should never inhibit the driver from seeing out the front, the left, and the right sides of that cab or that compartment. Okay, so if they can't see outside on the left or the right, and there are some exceptions, but if they can't see out the left and the right and the front, that's a violation of that 49 CFR Part 393. Okay. Number three, driver's inability to move. The driver should be able to freely move arms and legs and everything else inside that driver cab. If they can't move in that cab, it's a violation of 49 CFR 393. All right. Driver's inability to access emergency equipment. So if there's emergency equipment that they have that they need to access to be able to stop whatever is happening at the time, if they can't get to it, guess what? It's a violation. And the last thing is driver inability to quickly exit the vehicle cab or driver's compartment. So there should be nothing impeding. None of that cargo should be spilling over in a way that the driver cannot get out of the vehicle and handle whatever they need to handle expeditiously. All these situations, especially number one, improper securement, distribution, securement, and vehicle equipment. All these things right here are top reasons why you have cargo wrecks. Because if it's not tied down correctly, you're not using the proper equipment to tie it down, you're gonna have a situation on your hands. And the thing about truck drivers, and the thing that people really need to understand, is that civilians can get, civilians can go to jail for, driving drunk or doing something that is outside the scope of the law. But with truck drivers, because of the fact that they have such a huge task in front of them, it's a lot more serious. I mean, they're carrying, 26,000, 30,000, 40,000 pounds of, materials or whatnot. And these vehicles can cause much more significant damage than the average passenger vehicle. So this is why we have all these laws in place. People complain about the laws or whatnot, but if we didn't have these types of laws in place, what we have on our highways, we probably have mass carnage. Okay, so under this particular rule of law, cargo must not leak, it must not spill, it cannot blow off a vehicle, it cannot fall off or fall through a vehicle, and it must not become dislodged from the vehicle, and there can only be minimal movement on the load. Now, I went through that pretty quickly, but minimal movement on the load is a very good point to bring up, and it takes us to G-forces, or the force of gravity, when we're talking about how much a load can move when it's secured on the back of that truck and moving down the interstate. Now, if it's moving forward, if the truck is moving forward and it's braking, it can only have to be 80% driving straight. It can only be 80% as far as the G-force, okay? Because that's what the regulations, when it comes to this particular section of trucking, it relates to G-forces, or the force of gravity. So they can't move but so much. Now, like I said, forward force for braking, it's 80%, or 80 G-forces driving straight. For rearward force, it's 50% cargo weight. And this is when it's accelerating, when it's going up an incline, or when it's braking in reverse. That's for the rearward force, 50% cargo weight. For sideways force, this is when the cargo, this is how much it can move when it's turning, this is how much it can move when it's changing lanes, this is how much it can move when it's braking. It moves 50% cargo. Thank you for tuning in to the Big Rig Bull podcast with your host, Texas truck accident lawyer Reshard Alexander. Please subscribe and tune in next week for more information on commercial motor vehicle laws, news, and events. Have a blessed day.